What else? What else? What else can I have? What can life give me? I shouldn't say that. Which I never really paid attention to, but it says it right on the cover. Okay, now that's freaking done. Oh, poopsicle. That was longer than it needed to be. Hi, I'm Tabitha, and welcome to my channel, The Voxen. It's been a minute. Last 2.5 weeks have been a bit crazy. First, I was very, very sick. Body decided to explode. So there was that. And then I was too tired in recovery to actually film anything. And that week I had only ever read one thing. And then the following week, my body decided to also get a cold. And my phone decided to die. So I had to get a new one. And since I record on my phone, couldn't record. And then I had the windows replaced in my apartment. So there's all that. And then it was PA Day on Friday. And then it was Family Day, which is a holiday here in Canada, in Ontario, on Monday. So all that happened. And so I could not film. And also, if you happen to hear someone yelling in the background of this, it is probably my husband, since he is home recuperating from hernia surgery. So what else? What else? What else can I have? What can life give me? I shouldn't say that. So this is going to be a what are you reading for the last 2.5 weeks. And my cat has decided that I need to be giving him attention, so if he happens to jump up, there's that. Okay, so the week that I was sick, the only thing that I ended up reading was Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. Now, this copy that I have here is actually the abridged version, which I never really paid attention to, but it says it right on the cover. However, I did some immersive reading while I was doing this, and the audiobook I was listening to was the full unabridged version. So that made reading this a little difficult, slightly confusing, until oh hey, stop. Really? No one needs to see your butt. Are you gonna sit quietly? Or are you gonna interrupt the whole thing? It is what it is. So yeah, I remember I was listening to the audiobook, and then I would sit down, find the page, and I was like, what? There's whole bits in here that I don't see. And then it dawned on me that it says right here, abridged. Brain. But I did listen to the full copy. Okay, so I actually really, really enjoyed this book. I can understand why people love the musical so much. I understand why people love the story so much. And some of the songs that I've heard from the musical, I get it. And I understand why this is such an enduring story, because it is about the plight of the poor, the working poor, and people who have been made to be thieves and then punished for it. And just all the unfortunates. Like circumstance, life has not dealt them a good hand. I understand why that is still very pertinent to today's situation, today's life. Why a lot of people still find so much to relate to in this book. And it's definitely worth another read. It's really so. It really it is a classic for a reason, and it is beloved for a reason. And I suggest anyone who has not picked it up, pick up Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. It's an amazing book. All right, so the next thing that I read, which again I was surprised by how much I loved it, was The Terror by Dan Simmons. This book had me from the very beginning. As you can see, there's so many annotations. there were points where I was yelling at the book, and a lot is made about the monster in this, and the monster is integral but not greatly featured, if that makes any sense. So what this is about the Franklin expedition to find the Northwest Passage up in northern Canada, to find it easier way essentially to get to Asia. And the Franklin expedition, for anyone who doesn't know, was doomed. They got locked in the ice twice. Then they had to abandon ship and try to find people and civilization and save who was left. For the longest time, the Franklin expedition was thought to have resorted to cannibalism. But that's, I think that has been refuted, that it's been proven to be false. You're gonna make this so hard, aren't you? But for this, it is a supernatural cat. Seriously. It's a supernatural historical fiction. So there's this monster that Dan Simmons did make up, but it is similar to, say, a Wendigo or a Skinwalker. Like, it's along those lines kind of monster, but more of more godlike than human made, because it was created by the gods. But that's besides the point. The whole story is about these shipwrecked sailors trying to survive a deadly, harsh climate, environment, and a monster that's trying to kill them. And and the main monster is mostly humanity. I mean, I think that's why the actual monster in this, the creature isn't is only talked about and hinted at and seen in the background more than actually upfront and featured, because the real monster is man's inhumanity to man. There's one one character, I think his name Cornelius Hickey. Yeah, Cornelius Hickey. He was a caulker on the ship. I think he was originally on the Terror, not the Erebus. I have so many of these tabs are a whole bunch of "fuck you, Hickey," because he is an evil son of a bitch, and it's awful. And I love how angry it made me, because it was quite entertaining. It did not end the way I thought it would. It was actually quite interesting. Yeah, the personal character development of some of the characters, how they descend or how they overcome, depending on who and what happens, is actually really quite interesting. So I would highly suggest The Terror by Dan Simmons. I like this a hell of a lot more than I liked Hyperion. But yeah, there's that. Next up was another chonker, The Dragonbone Chair by Tad Williams. Now, I've read quite a few, not quite a few, I have read a few Tad Williams books. I have read the For Otherland. It's Otherland, not Otherworld, Otherland books. And I really love them, except for the ending. And then I also read the standalone Tail Chasers song, which I loved, except the ending. And my experience with Tad Williams endings are that they the story ends long before the book does. Like, not like within the last quarter, the story ends, but then it kind of all of a sudden picks up another story, and then it's just over. So I always found that to be really annoying. But his prose, the way he tells the story, aside from that little nitpicky detail that I don't like, I really, really enjoy the books. And this was no different. I always find some character to complain about, and Simon is definitely the complainy character. It starts out he's a 14-year-old boy, so yeah, he's gonna be 14-year-old boy and being super annoying about it. So like looking at girls and being like, "Ooh, I wonder what she looks like naked," or "I'm such an idiot all the time," blah blah blah, and like the teenage angst and the underdeveloped social skills. Like, yeah, he's annoying, and he's developing as a character. It's unfortunate that he's the main character, but when he comes across Bibinek, I love Bibinek so much. I really hope that I am saying his name properly. But the little troll character, he's adorable, um, and he's kind of like the first guide that Simon has. And I'm not explaining the story at all. So the Dragonbone Chair is about this kingdom where you have this like William the Conqueror sort of character who had come and united this land, but he was a foreigner, and his name was Prester John. And when he dies, his heir takes over, but his heir ends up being either willingly or unwillingly controlled or influenced by an evil alchemist and other evil powers, the great evil that is coming to destroy everything again. And Simon um, foils an initial plot to kill his brother, so the new king's brother, who's a prince of Prester, son of Prester John, and typical of Tad Williams' stories is there's quite a lot going on. There are a lot of characters, and there is a lot of backstory, exposition, mythology, just peppered in amongst just about every sentence, every paragraph. So there's a lot to take in, but the characters are all very well crafted, and it, you can see the development happening in Simon, and you can see the friendship building between him and Bibinek. Um, and it's just, I think it's the first book in the, what is it, the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn series. And I think this is the original trilogy, and I think that there is another, like the Last Kings of Ostenard trilogy as well. Ostenard being the main world that this takes place in. And the things that I ended up tabbing was just relations to similar sort of stories in both religion and folklore and all that. So there's a god that Erkenlanders they believe in, and it's kind of like a Christ-like figure, but he was hung upside down in a tree, so it's kind of evocative of like the Hanged Man um, imagery from tarot. And then Christ on the cross, or also known as the tree, and um, there are Northerners who believe in like Odin and a whole bunch of like the Norse gods, and yeah, there's a lot that people find to be familiar, but it's used in a slightly skewed way. I recommend it. It was really fun. Really enjoy it. We'll read the rest. The next one I actually put off from last summer because I had read Nine Fox Gambit and really didn't enjoy it at all. And it wasn't that the writing was bad. I just didn't get it, and I couldn't get the characters, and it just wasn't for me. So this was the second chance for Yoon Ha Lee for my taste. And that's Phoenix Extravagant. I loved this book from the very beginning. From the very beginning, I loved it. It was amazing. And then the when the dragon, when Arazi is actually introduced, I loved the voice of Arazi and just like how it's a war machine that still kind of speaks like an innocent, because they don't know. They start being able to communicate with Jebby um, in their mind, and it's just they're the way that they communicate is beautiful. And then there's the story of Jebby falling in love. Like, Jebby is a non-binary character, and they fall in love with their um, commanding officer. I don't know. They're a civilian employee in um, the Ministry of Armor in this world, and it's just the ending was a little strange because they just kind of put the Celestials in at the very end, and it was a little off and quick. But otherwise, I loved this book. So it doesn't mean that Yoon-Ha Lee is the problem. I'm the problem. I just didn't get Nine Fox Gambit, and that's okay. But I loved this book, so maybe I'll like more of their stuff. And it's really cool. Magical mech dragons. I will leave it at that. The next one, like I said, there's a lot to get through. That I have read was The Salmon of Doubt by Douglas Adams. I've only ever read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, so the trilogy in 4 parts. So I read this. I'd never read any of his non-fictional stuff. So actually getting to know him as a person, so to speak, through his writing was delightful. It was a little sad that it opens with a foreword by Stephen Fry talking about his dead friend. And then also there was the eulogy that was written. And I'd never read any of the Dirk Gently stuff, but the Salmon of Doubt story at the very end, it was very familiar from when I had read Hitchhiker's Guide. And there's so much in this that I just found to be really funny, and especially when he was talking about how did he phrase it? Oh, yeah, there's a whole bit in here a speech that he had given on the theory of an artificial god. So that was really, really fun. And it makes sense to why he and Stephen Fry would have been friends. I suggest if you liked Hitchhiker's Guide, or if you read any of the Dirk Gently books, that this is really fun. Even if not, even if you just like, this is a good primer. Even though it's just interviews and op-eds and little bits of writing and whatnot. His humor, his intelligence, his curiosity all comes through. So this was a really good read. And I finally caught up on all of the Old Kingdom books that I have. So I also read Golden Hand by Garth Nix, and this is the 5th book in the Aporson series, or the Old Kingdom series. This is such a comfy series for me. I think I've read the first initial 3 books, so Sabriel, Lyriel, and Aborson, twice. I've gone through those already. And it was nice to see some of those old characters, and to see Nick Sayer be a little bit more fleshed out after he was so badly used in Lyriel and Aporson. So this was a cozy read, and it was nice YA fantasy. I would suggest the Aporson series, at least the initial trilogy, to anyone, even just the first book, because it is great. So those is what I have read and finished in the last 2 weeks while I have been otherwise occupied. And what I am currently reading is this YA fantasy called Kingdom of Souls by Rena Barron. And it is definitely YA, but it is an African-inspired theology, mythology, fantasy world. So it all has to do with this girl. Her name is Era. She is the daughter of two very strong magical lines, but she doesn't really have any magic of her own. She can see it, but she doesn't have any that she can command for herself. And in the city that she lives in, children start disappearing, and she finds out something really upsetting as to why. And that's about as far as I have gotten. But it's I definitely will continue with the trilogy. I believe it is just a trilogy. But it is wonderful to see such familiar story from a different viewpoint. Not saying that it like the young girl is a different viewpoint, but the whole Afrocentric viewpoint of the story is a lot more entertaining, a little more interesting, because the story, the I don't know if I'm explaining this properly. The way that this story is normally told, the African-inspired elements actually make it seem fresh, if that makes any sense. So there's that. So I am reading that. I am listening to the audiobook of Africa Risen, which is a short story anthology of speculative fiction by African and BIPOC authors. So I've started that as well. I'm trying to think if there's another thing. No, there's those two that I am reading, and I have what's up next is this chunker. Yeah. For the longest time, it had the original artwork, and I didn't like it. The artwork, like the cover design and the artwork, just turned me off, even though the title itself, the blade itself, is an interesting title, and that is imagination catching. But I just did not like the cover art at all, and I just would never pick it up. I'd always see, the blade itself, and then see the cover, like, it just really turned me off. And then I saw this when this came out, and I love that, like, the initial trilogy, it's like red, and then a blue spine, and then like a yellow spine, and I loved that block color design, and I loved this a hell of a lot more than I liked the original, like, scroll and ink sort of design. So now I finally picked it up, and I'm going to start this. But this is a freaking chunky book, like another 500 pages. So I don't read that many small things. So that is what I have been up to, what has been happening the last couple of weeks. Hopefully I can get back into the swing of this bit now that everything is kind of settled down again. Made myself a little book nook in the corner of my apartment. And I can get back to filming again and get back to reading again. So there's that. So what have you been reading recently? Your faves? Have you liked anything that I have spoken about this week? Your thoughts, feelings, likes, dislikes. What are you reading? Let me know down in the comments. And otherwise, I will see you in the next one. If you like the video, and please subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye.